Welcome back to another MECH 1000 video. In this video I'm going to show you how to make diagonal lines. So a lot of our early assignments in this class, a lot of them consist of just vertical and horizontal lines. And so I've shown you how you can use snap mode to click on the intersections of grid lines to make vertical and horizontal lines. You can also, using polar tracking or ortho mode, either of those two options, I'll turn snap mode off, you can use either of these two options to choose a starting point, either arbitrarily by clicking somewhere on the screen, or maybe by specifying coordinates and then indicating with the direction of your cursor the direction you want the line to go, and keying in with your keyboard the length you want that line to be. And so that works out really well for vertical and horizontal lines, but what do we do when we want to create a diagonal line? Well, if it's a line, say at a 45-degree angle, we can still use our snap mode. We just pick a line that is equal number of spaces over as well as up, or over and down, and we can create diagonal lines at a 45-degree angle. But what if we want to do something at a different angle? I'm going to select all of this and erase it, and let's draw some diagonal lines. So one way to do it is with coordinates. So I still have my snap mode set on so I can choose my first point. Let's say I'll choose it right there. And maybe I want, maybe I know that my line's going to go over 5 units and up 2 units or something like that. Again, I guess I could use snap mode for this as well. It doesn't have to be a 45-degree angle. If I know how far over and up I want it to go, I can just count the number of blocks over and up, and then I can click. So that would be over 5, up 2. Okay, so yeah, I guess I could still use the snap mode. But let's show some other ways we could do it. I could just click at my starting point and then key in the coordinates 5, 2. And again, that'll make a line that goes over 5 inches and up 2 inches. So I can always use the keyboard to key in coordinates. Now I have to take a moment here to talk about something that's called the dynamic input. So notice as I start the line command that I have this heads-up display that pops up next to my cursor, indicating what I should do next, specify the first point, and also telling me what the coordinates are of that point. And then as I begin to make the line, you can see it's indicating to me the approximate angle of the line and length. All this stuff that's popping up on the screen is called the dynamic input. And it actually does have an effect on the way we input coordinates. So when your dynamic input is turned on, which it is by default, so if you're just opening up AutoCAD for the first time and just beginning to use it, chances are your dynamic is already turned on. And so when the dynamic input is turned on, it is assuming that anytime you key in coordinates, you are meaning to specify relative coordinates, meaning that having chosen a point right here, if I want to choose a second point for my line and I key in 5, 2, it assumes that I mean I want the next point on my line to be 5 inches over and 2 inches up relative to my starting point. The alternate to relative coordinates is absolute coordinates, and they always start off at the origin. So if I wanted to start a line here, and then I wanted the next point to be the coordinate down here of, let's say, 1 inch over and 1 inch up, 1, 1, the absolute coordinate 1, 1, I would have to hit the Shift 3 button, like a number sign or hashtag, and then put in something like 1, 1. And that would tell AutoCAD that the second point of this line should be the absolute coordinate 1, 1. If I choose this starting point and I don't put in the number symbol, if I just simply type 1, 1, then it puts in relative coordinates. So relative to the starting point, it goes over 1 inch, up 1 inch. So that's the difference between relative and absolute coordinates. So when your dynamic input is turned on, relative coordinates are default, and you have to use the number sign to indicate absolute coordinates. Now, I personally am not a huge fan of the dynamic input, and so let me show you how you can turn it off. Many students do like it, so you don't have to do this, but I'm just pointing this out just in case. If you click the 3 lines down here in the lower right, all of these check marks indicate the options that are appearing in this bottom tray. So right now, dynamic input isn't even an option. By clicking it, it now is an option. This symbol right here is the dynamic input, and it is currently turned on. If I turn it off, and let's say I choose a point right here, and I type the coordinates 1, 1, enter, you can see where it went. The second point chosen was the absolute coordinates 1, 1. In other words, 1 inch over and 1 inch up from the origin. So when the dynamic input is turned off, the default assumption from AutoCAD is that you are specifying absolute coordinates. If I wanted to say, no, I want relative coordinates. Relative to my starting point, I want to go 1 inch over and 1 inch up. I would have to type in Shift 2, like the @ symbol in an email address, at 1, 1, and that makes the line go over 1, up 1, with respect to the starting point. Now, one reason I prefer to have my dynamic input turned off is because, well, honestly, there was no dynamic input when I first learned AutoCAD. So that's what I'm used to. I feel like it can be visually cluttering, just having all that stuff on the screen, and I like my user interface to be a little more sleek. The other reason that you may find is that sometimes having the dynamic input turned on really slows down the performance of AutoCAD. It creates a lot of lag. And simply by turning off the dynamic input, you may find that it is much more responsive and that lag goes away. So if you're experiencing any issues with lag when you're using AutoCAD, that would be my first recommendation, is turn off dynamic input. Now, a couple more ways to make a diagonal line. I briefly introduced in an earlier video polar tracking. Polar tracking is the one down here. It kind of looks like a piece of pizza being taken out of a pizza. And if you click the arrow beside it, we can choose these various increments. Let's say like 30 degrees. So I can choose a starting point, and when my cursor gets close to, I think I should turn off snap mode. Snap mode's kind of interfering. There we go. When I'm close to a 30-degree increment, a green line shows up, and I can snap on that line. And as you can see here, if I put an angular dimension on it, now you don't need to worry about dimensions yet, I'm just doing this to prove a point. that's 30 degrees. But that's just 30 degrees rounded to the nearest whole number. Let me do something here real quick that you don't need to worry about doing yourself quite yet. I'm going to modify the dimensions. My primary units, I'm going to change here my angular dimensions. I'm going to give a whole lot of precision to my angular dimension, just to prove that that is exactly 30 degrees, 30.00000, and so on. So that's a way you can make a line at a 30-degree angle, is using polar tracking. You can choose 23, 18, 15, 10, or even 5-degree increments is the smallest choice. So I could choose an individual line, starting point, and then every 5 degrees, there's 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on. I can get that exact angular measurement, 20 degrees exactly. So you can use polar tracking as a way to make a line at a specific angle. And there's yet another. Let's say I start a line there and I want to make its angle with respect to the horizontal something like, I don't know, what were the increments here? 5, 10, 15, 18. Let's say I wanted 7 degrees. That's not an option here. So how could I do that? So I'm going to start the line command, choose the starting point, and then because I have my dynamic input turned off, I'm going to start this by using the @ symbol for relative coordinates. I need to specify the length of the line. I'm going to say 5. And then instead of a comma, I'm going to hit the shift comma, which gives me that symbol there that looks kind of like a less than symbol to indicate the angle, and I can say 7. So 5 inches long at a 7-degree angle. That gives me exactly a 7-degree angle. Now, real quickly, my videos are limited to 15 minutes because of the recording software I'm using. So I'm going to try to get this in here real quick. A common mistake I see students make is they have their dynamic input turned on, and they are looking at that dynamic input, and for instance, right there, it's saying that that's a 23-degree angle. And so they click there, and they think they've just made a 23-degree angle. But if I put an angular measurement on there, an angular dimension, you can see that's not exactly 23 degrees. That angular measurement that pops up in your heads-up display in that dynamic input, that's only approximate. So you should never rely on that for making a line at a specific angle. So I've shown you now how to use relative coordinates, absolute coordinates, polar tracking, and specifying with the keyboard what you want the angle to be. So those are all different valid ways of making diagonal lines.